Saint Asterius. Um, there actually, he wrote, or a number of other of his homilies are uh, published in Greek only, unfortunately. Um, so they're not in English translation. Let's just discuss on divorce. First of all, let's begin by reading the um, entire encounter, which I think is really interesting. He just basically his his um, his homily is based on only a single verse in the encounter, and the Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause?" And then so he ignores the rest, but the entire encounter is interesting. So I thought it might be good to read it. So it's Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 through 10. And Pharisees came up to him and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause?" He answered, "Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one'? So they are no longer two, but one. What therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder." They said to him, "Why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away?" He said to them, "For your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for unchastity and marries another commits adultery, and he who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." The disciples said to him, "If such is the case of a man with his wife, it is not expedient to marry." And we can stop there. I wanted to especially get that last verse in, because they're asking him, if you can't divorce, what's the point? What's the point of getting married? It's sort of like you get married in order to get divorced. And if you can't get divorced, it's just a bad deal. So I thought that was a particularly clueless question by the disciples.
Yeah.
Although they had a habit of being clueless. When the rich man walked away after Jesus told him to sell all his possessions and give to the poor, they asked, "Who then can be saved?" So are there any thoughts or comments about his homily?
He really came down hard on the husbands,
Yeah.
big time, until
Mhm.
until he talked about a wife being unfaithful. Then it was harsh, but for the most part, it was
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
really strong against the men.
He's basically following Jesus' teaching that the only grounds for divorce is adultery.
Mhm.
Um, and it's important to put this in context in terms of so originally in Jesus' time, men have the right of divorce.
Mhm.
Men can divorce their wives. Women cannot divorce their husbands. So divorce is a male prerogative, and I think that's still probably true in Asterius's time. So um, male divorce only, and divorce is really a serious matter for a woman, since
Yeah.
generally, I mean, although there are exceptions, women have, no independent, no resources independent of their husband. So the choices are you either go back to your family if they take you back, or often you become, if you don't have anything, you become a prostitute. So divorce becomes, a really very serious matter. And and then the question is, what, and so given that only men can divorce, the whole thing is weighted very heavily against women. And, there's a real danger of destitution and degradation. And so then the question is, what are the conditions under which a man can divorce his husband? I'm not sure what they are in Asterius' time, but in Jesus' time, there's a debate among, the really three major rabbis of the conditions under which divorce is acceptable. The the most liberal of the rabbis was Rabbi Hillel, who argued that a man could divorce a woman even for spoiling his meal. So, of course, women are supposed to do all of the cooking and manage the household. And, if you bungle a dinner or a lunch or whatever, then that's grounds for divorce because proven to be an incapable, incompetent household manager. The intermediate, I mean, think about that. The intermediate position is occupied by Rabbi Rabbi Akiba, who says that you can divorce your wife if you find someone else you prefer.
Typical.
So women just, become replaceable objects of male gratification.
Yeah.
And then the conservative position is Rabbi Shammai, who also influenced Paul. But his position was that a man can divorce only in the case of adultery. Um, but then the problem is a woman can't divorce in the case of adultery because divorce is a male prerogative, not a something that a woman can initiate. So those are the those are the three major positions. Um, and so, given that, um, Asterius really tries to see an equality of of the genders of sexes, that women are equal partners in a marriage, that the goal of marriage is to become one flesh, and that really makes you equal. And so the only justifiable cause for divorce is adultery.
That's what he meant by or when he said in the beginning there are two ordinances of marriage. He meant by that bound by law and nature, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But he really argues for superiority of nature over law for Christians. He also, interestingly, in the marriage vows, there's till death do us part.
Yeah.
He argues that death doesn't us part.
Right. It's pretty poetic, that passage he used about
Mm-hmm.
those particular birds. What was it? Doves or something?
Turtle doves.
Turtle doves, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, he does not lead a second wife to the marriage bed still warm of her who is departed, nor does he give a stepmother, hateful name, to his children. but he imitates the strange yet natural devotion of the turtle dove, where they say that that bird, once separated from its mate, devotes itself to perpetual widowhood and is very different from the common dove as far as mating again is concerned. So then, let reproaches come thick and fast upon the husband who seeks divorce, and let the charges of ingratitude, falling thicker than snowflakes, pelt him. It's actually true of, I'm not sure if it's in fact true of turtle doves, but it is true of a number of birds that
Mhm.
if their partner dies, they sometimes they waste away and die themselves,
Yeah.
and other times they don't find a new mate.
Mm.
That's true of like mallards. That's true of crows.
Oh,
When you see a single crow, it's a very sad thing because it means their partner is dead.
a long time ago, I remember way in the way back time in my bicycling days, coming upon two cedar waxwings. They're smallish birds in
Mm-hmm.
eastern Washington, and what it was a pair. Well, one must have gotten hit by a car because its mate was standing right next to it. I, I, I think I was told that cedar waxwings are those kind of birds that they have a mate for life. It was so
Yeah,
sad. It
that's
was
very sad.
very,
Yeah, on Totem Lake Boulevard, I was driving, I guess from my apartment when I lived there to like Trader Joe's, and somebody in front of me ran over a crow,
oh,
and I got out to see if the crow had, you know, was indeed killed. And its mate was right there and was just, distraught. It was just,
oh,
it was incredibly painful to watch. The,
wow,
the crow was just in deep despair,
wow.
looking at the remains of its mate. Very, very sad. I was very much of, a person had seen their partner
Yeah.
run over by a car. And yeah,
He early on he kind of alludes like one of the excuses about housekeeping or you know various things. He kind of acknowledges that there's some validity to that, but that's if you're looking at things from a secular point of view. He he kind of made it sound like it was understandable in a way, but um,
Yeah, he said when you first married her, didn't you know that you were being joined to a human being?
right,
Kind of like a so what? Deal with it.
yeah,
right.
a sinful person, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, what he's implying there is that we're all sinners.
Right.
We
No
all
one's
have
perfect. Yeah.
sins. So why are you concentrating on your wife's sins
Yeah.
and
hmm
not on your own? I mean, certainly, those your wife certainly finds those equally egregious.
And
And
then also says, do you not cause your wife pain by your conduct? Are you free
yeah,
from all faults? Do you preserve the ordinance of wedlock and purity? And then he says, and how many shortcomings of yours are kept secret
yeah,
because
exactly.
your wife has not published them? For all your complaining about your wife,
right,
she's not. Yeah.
right, yeah,
Also, too, in the beginning, I mean, he really does rake men over the coals. It's humorous in a way about two strangers, two men that meet on the road, and they kind of buddy up for a little while, and then they they part with great reluctance, and that the husband would never accord his wife that kind of friendship, but here he does it to a stranger.
Uh,
Um,
That was humorous. And also, in regards to the brief quote that he gave at the beginning from the Gospel of Matthew, that I think he was saying that that the Pharisees brought this to the group, so it sounds like they were trying to get their fellow men to, because they were in a group that they could all kind of agree to that. Yeah, that's, there's kind of commiserate with the men. And
I think it's less commiserate than that they were trying to anger the women who followed Jesus, since
okay.
he had a substantial female following. And so at the women followed him to the cross,
Yeah,
while
that was confusing.
while
Okay.
the male disciples fled,
Mhm.
other than John, and and women were the first to the tomb.
Mhm.
So um, so women really played a substantial, significant role in Jesus' ministry, were formed a significant portion of the disciples. And from all accounts, there was very, although the 12 apostles were all male, there was generally you know, very little separation or distinction drawn between men and women. So, so given that divorce is really a, uh, a, a can be a really divisive topic because it's a male prerogative, and you see the male disciples, falling into the trap by asking, after Jesus gives his response, um, if you can't divorce, what's the point of getting married?
Yeah.
And so certainly for women, that has to be threatening and unacceptable. And particularly for Jesus' disciples, for women who are disciples of Jesus, that has to be especially galling and unacceptable, because we're supposed to be living in the kingdom of God and reflecting the values and the morality and the ethics of the kingdom of God. And male superiority is really not one of those values and ethics. I mean, it is, of course, today in much of Christian society, and, particularly in the white evangelical church, which, um, is very misogynistic, um, and unfortunately, I mean, many Christians today are willing to embrace. I mean, for many, adultery has been transformed into a virtue.
Are you talking about the television evangelists, especially?
Yeah, but also Christians who support Donald Trump, a man who has been a serial adulterer throughout his life, who only, began to deny his latest affairs because he was running for president. But when he was, younger, flaunted them and was proud of it. If you then support someone who is a serial adulterer, you're condoning adultery.
Mhm.
So in any case, back to Asterius. I mean, I thought this was, uh, I think, my favorite of his five sermons. I mean, he really made, I think, great pains to assert the equality of men and women, their equal dignity in a marital relationship. their equal rights in a marital relationship. And even by today's standards, he's way ahead of his time,
Mhm.
especially in among Christians. What he doesn't discuss, well, he discusses it, but he discusses it as an element of a man's sin, is violence against the woman.
Mm.
Oh, do you mean physical violence or just his behavior?
Physical violence. I saw it as him as meaning physical violence.
Oh, how many times perhaps your wife has endured your drunken violence?
Yeah,
How many insults and shameful reproaches she has patiently suffered. And that's followed by, and how many shortcomings of yours are kept secret? She was born with you when you're angry without reason and boiling with wrath, and a free woman, you're equal in station. Aha. Yeah.
Boiling with
Does
wrath.
it.
That's
Remain
it.
silent like a slave from the market.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's also interesting how much he elaborated on all the things the wife does. You know, remember years ago when that was put on a scale of how much money
Oh, yes.
you would make? Yeah.
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 So
If you
he
had to hire
basically,
all those people to do all those
yes,
things. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. To be a nurse, a babysitter, and a house.
Cook,
Well, he names it all. Yeah.
laundress,
Yeah. So
laundress.
serious. Yeah. He knew it. Maybe things would have been different if he were better known. Different for us sooner.
yeah,
You who change your wives as readily as your garments,